everyone. Welcome to the Mogabr show. I'm Gabe, as always. With me, I have a very special guest, Maryam Mahdaviani. She's joining me today from Vancouver, which I am extremely jealous about because I love Vancouver for anybody who knows me. Maryam, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And hello to everyone who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to start a little bit about yourself because you've held a lot of leadership roles within different tech and other companies as well. But, last year, you and I were talking, you took 7 months off to travel, which was phenomenal. If anyone is ever in a position to do that, I highly recommend it. It's such a great way to decompress and, regenerate or rejuvenate rather. But, tell me about yourself let's talk about before the 7 months, and then we can talk about whatever we want to talk about, but let's talk about prior to those 7 months. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you were at Honey, I know you were at a few other places. Let's talk about your career, what led you here and what led to those 7 months of you time.
Perfect. Yeah, for a number of years, I was very focused on building. So after, I finished school, I went to grad school, and like any other student, I was doing internship, doing software development jobs because my studies was in computer science and then machine learning. And then I even, work with Intel research. It's just interesting to talk about it. We were working on sensory data and how we could use sensory data for activity recognition. This is basically predating wearables. So at that time, we were kind of using sensory kits. We were attaching it to cell phones and see how we could use sensory data for activity recognition. This was before, Apple Watch and wristbands and all that. So I was a researcher, I was building, then I started a company in Vancouver because I was fascinated by online shopping and e-commerce, and I wanted to really make that easier. So for a few years, I was building that company. Then I moved to the US. At that time, I was based in Vancouver. I moved to the US and I was very interested in disruption in fintech. So I joined a company called Green Dot. I was a product lead there, and I was in charge of spinning off banking as a service platform. So I was, again, very focused. I became kind of an operator. So I was a founder for a few years and just, really focused on the mission that I had. Then, I became an operator and, product lead. But, when you have more senior positions in corporations, you also become kind of an agent of a corporation, like a business operator. So I was very focused on that, and a very interesting ride that I could also get into it if there's interest. That was it for 4.5 years. Then I met the founders at Honey. I joined them to help them scaling the business. Again, being an operator, really focus on the tasks at hand, the goals that we had. So after the acquisition, I basically thought to myself that, okay, this was it. This was kind of 5-6 years of being a founder, then 7 years of being an operator. What is my next move, right? I spent a good amount of time in e-commerce and fintech. Should just focus on what I've done so far, and then basically just get another job as become another operator at a, Series C company. That was a natural move. But, I found myself kind of sitting, thinking to myself, is that really what I want? Is that the most interesting that I want to do? Is that the end of all the disruptions? Should I move to a new space? And I didn't have a clear answer. So that was alarming to me because I often want to be, as much as I can, a person who is in charge of her life, right? So I was basically thinking that I just don't want to get into another role just because it seems to be a natural thing to do or it's a safe thing to do. But in order to make that decision, I needed to explore. So I needed to explore my interests. I needed to figure out, okay, what is this new world that we're living in, because it was in the midst of, the pandemic and, what are the changes? What are the user expectations, and sort of kind of figure out, okay, what is the next thing that I want to focus on, and what is the next direction the world is taking, right? So I figured that, okay, I need to actually have this time to explore. So I explored geographically, and also I explored different spaces to educate myself and also find my interest. So this was kind of before, like really focused, but
Yeah.
then I felt like, okay, I don't know if I'm comfortable with the next move, so I better pause.
I mean, I think that's something that I find is quite common for somebody with, because you're an operator and you're used to being in such control of, these things. You've been a founder and you've been an operator, and you had a certain level of autonomy and control over situations. So to be in a position where you're sort of reevaluating, what do you want to do next? I imagine I don't know if it's worrying or if it's refreshing, because all of a sudden, I mean, for me personally, like when I left Zoom last year, it felt like a huge relief, because for the longest, it was like, even though I jumped into another tech company 3 months later, the expectation of being at, such a high growth startup, then eventually public company, this is who you are, this is what you're going to continue to do. And no, there's more to me than that. And you want to do next. So it felt like a huge weight personally lifted off my shoulder, where I'm like, I can do anything I want.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that way? Was it, because you traveled, I
Definitely,
traveled a little bit,
definitely.
definitely
It's
not for 7 months, but
liberating, definitely. But at the end, you might actually end up doing the same thing. But at least you feel like, okay, I've taken my time and I'm making a conscious decision, and I'm not doing it just because it was the most accessible thing to do.
yeah,
I mean, nothing wrong to, if you were at a Zoom, basically kind of doing kind of the same thing after 3-4 months, or if, I came back and I said, oh, I want to actually do something again in payment, or if I want to do, something really in the space that I'm comfortable with, or
yeah,
join another company, right? Like, I basically gave myself the freedom to choose, and that didn't mean choosing something that is very different necessarily, but basically just taking the time, educating myself, giving myself the mental space to come to that decision. And I think that's important. Like, you don't want to, like, if you are taking such a break, or call it a sabbatical. And by the way, I did consulting. It wasn't like a complete break for the entire time for me, but basically
uh,
just kind of giving myself the freedom to do that reflection and education. But that didn't mean that I set the expectation that I should come to some conclusion that would be completely different.
no, and I think that's key. I think everyone's got to go into it and be brutally honest with themselves and say, okay, hey, what do I want from this time? And maybe you want to consult, maybe you want to be a full-time consultant for yourself, be your own boss at your own hours,
Right.
pick your own customers, or you want to get back into a full-time thing. You just want to take a little bit of a break, which
Mm-hmm.
is normal. We everybody needs a break sometime. Mental health, obviously being at the forefront the last several years, is a really big thing. Taking your me time is very important. And, people don't realize that the pressures that come from working at a startup sometimes, because there is
Yeah,
so much that is like,
yeah,
you're on, you're on,
definitely.
you're on. Everyone romanticizes it as, I want to work there because, once we IPO, it's going to go. But at the same time, it's like, you don't realize the amount of work that's involved prior to. And everyone says like, oh, I can work hard, I've always worked hard. But then when you're working hard, it's like, wait a second, I don't have any time to myself. No, you really don't. So it's like, you really have to think about what you
Yeah.
want and be careful about what you ask for. So you have to be honest with yourself. So I think that that's great that you took that.
Yeah. I mean,
So
one other thing to mention, it was also the need. I felt like I needed to be exposed to
mhm,
sort of people and thoughts that maybe I was not getting exposed to, or even get exposed to thoughts and people that I didn't expect.
yeah,
That's sort of what I was craving as well.
yeah,
I felt like things were too structured for a
yeah.
while. For example, with traveling, what I did, I just didn't go to like, to visit tourist attractions. So I tried to actually, push myself to actually do something with locals in every location.
Oh yeah, I love
To
that.
start conversations, with different people, in the cities I
You'd be
visit.
surprised what you learned doing that. It's just, if you only go to the tourist attractions, you're only going to learn the same thing that everybody else has learned going
Right.
there. If you go to the little hole in the wall bar or eatery, maybe nobody only knows about, but the locals, I can't remember where we went. We were in Italy. We went to a place that was literally no menu. You just sat down, you eat whatever she brings out. And it was awesome.
Yeah,
And it was just like,
exactly.
food was great. That's all that matters. And it was just like, there was no name, no menus. You just, whatever she brings out, that's what you're going to eat. How can you beat that? It's like,
Definitely.
so,
And then like on top of that, okay, let's just actually have a conversation with her to see what are some of
yeah,
her, desires and ambitions are,
yeah.
or sort of some of her struggles. So it was interesting. It's an
No,
interesting
that's
and
awesome. What was your favorite place that you traveled to? Because I mean, you were 7 months. I mean,
yeah. No, I have a few favorites. I definitely enjoyed Berlin. Like I would consider moving to Berlin. Met very interesting people, a lot of people kind of its sort of original thoughts there. Portugal, a few spots in Portugal were also a lot of fun. I have this admiration for Scandinavian countries, and I love that. I don't know if I want to move there because of the weather, but definitely love, Copenhagen, I mean, all like Sweden, Finland, I love those countries, and sort of
hmm
how thoughtful they are and how much time they take
hmm
for planning. I don't see that, in North America. Obviously, there is a balance between agile and, we focus, as in product, we focus so much on iterative development and launching something soon,
hmm
which, has its own benefits and it's important. But it was kind of refreshing to see how much time they take to really understand the users, and also they think long term. Like they have, like for example, Finland and Denmark, they have about 5 million in population each. Sweden has 10. But the way they plan their products, like in the beginning, they plan and they build for an international expansion. And you see, amazing products. You see like Spotify, you see IKEA, you see like these like amazing countries coming out of, Scandinavian countries that are
yeah,
relatively, small. So it was just kind of, even from a product person point of view, it was kind of
yeah.
interesting, kind of as reassessing that mentality of kind of building quickly and, building
hmm
fast, failing fast, that kind of mentality that we keep pushing in the
Yeah.
US, especially, fueled by VCs. But it was kind of interesting to see how they are operating. I mean, as I said, it's important to have that
Mm,
balance, but it was kind of another interesting observation to see how much time they take and sort of the upfront investment that they make.
okay. No, that's really good to know because I think a lot of people don't realize the differences that are necessarily inherently in business. People sometimes think that business is business, even in
Yes.
tech space. It's like, yes, it's tech and it can be virtually done anywhere, but business does sort of adhere to local and cultural
Mhm.
standards, traditions, practices, etc. You know, depending on who's the leader, who's the founder, who's the operator. Let's talk about now. What are you working on now? Because I know you've got your hands in you're doing a lot of different things.
Yeah,
So,
which I'm trying to actually limit the number of things that I'm involved in. This is the thing, because for two years I was advising companies as part of a few different incubators as a mentor. I started doing some angel investment because it was also part of my effort to contribute, but also to educate myself, basically kind of by helping others in, kind of in like the fractional work and the projects that I was doing, also kind of figure out what I'm trying to do and also learn from them, because I feel like,
mhm,
for the growth, I couldn't just reflect and travel, right? Like I needed to somehow like stay connected in my own way. So as a result, I ended up being kind of on a board of a few companies. So I'm kind of trying to, at least I'm not adding to that list, and I'm trying to sort of gracefully minimize my involvement in a way that doesn't hurt the companies that I made commitment to. But I'm working on a new venture. So I started also kind of incubating ideas, the ideas that I had, and the way I approached it is, if I had an idea, it's like talking with people who've done things in that space or people who would benefit from it. I have the pain. So just have the conversations and then put together, mock-ups and designs to actually do sort of kind of user testing. So I tested a few. I've been kind of incubating ideas and testing them somewhat systematically. One of the things that I became very interested in last year, especially as I was traveling around and I was getting involved with DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, was just the future of work and how the nature of work is changing rapidly, how for good reasons it's becoming more value-based, how talented individuals around the world who are younger, in their 20s, early 30s, I could see the shift, how they are interested in being freelancers or working on multiple projects at the same time, contrary to how maybe like older millennials or maybe like when our parents are getting a job, like after college they're getting a job with the mentality that they would stay at the corporation for their lifetime. It was like a lifetime commitment from that was sort of the mentality. That's how companies were positioning themselves and offering jobs. And it was kind of the end of the world, right? If someone was like losing his job. And then just look at us, like every few years we're changing jobs. And then I could see that a lot of people now are interested in actually working in, with a few different companies at the same time and have like different contracts. So it was kind of interesting that the desire to be a freelancer was not necessarily coming from that YOLO movement. I mean, nothing wrong with YOLO movement, by the way, but it's not just because, they want to have fun and they have the flexibility to travel or vacation, but also the fact that they could see that, okay, they have control, maybe they could have a faster rate of growth. So it's just interesting to kind of work with individuals globally and just see this shift. Because, also during my career, I had built teams, and just kind of observing that shift in mentality was quite refreshing. So I became very interested in that future of work, how you could really make the connections between the global talent pool and the businesses. Besides these observations, I was also working as a consultant, not just for companies in the US, but for European countries. And I could see some of the challenges. I was hiring contractors, for my projects that I was incubating. And I could see that, okay, well, there are sourcing agencies, there are work platforms that have pretty high take rates, and so I was basically kind of digging in and figuring out, okay, what are the problems and how you could start helping this global talent pool that increasingly is interested in freelance work, with the businesses that also desire this elastic workforce. And why not? I mean, they should be able to access the best, right? And so kind of digging in, first, I was very interested in how I could use like the smart contract and the fact that things are programmatic in a way that, trust is established more easily between businesses and contractors, so that you don't need to have that middleman for that sense of trust. And as I was started engaging with the businesses and contractors, I realized that vetting and assessing the credibility of these freelancers is a huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
And maybe the main reason that a lot of businesses might actually go to the sourcing agencies.
Hmm.
But like when you think about it, that is one of the things that kind of sourcing companies or work platforms would offer, because they would do some level of vetting. They also, process payments. But is it right that they continuously charge about like 20-30% of the pay? So that's sort of how I kind of got into this kind of mindset that, okay, if you are providing a service, as in, okay, like helping with assessing the credibility and, basically you vet the candidate, you just have to get paid for the service you offer. I mean, you shouldn't take hostage, the talent that you found. And why should we let these companies? I mean, again, I don't have
Yeah.
anything personally against them, but I feel like
Yeah.
this is wrong. It's a form of like rent seeking, in my opinion. So you provide a service and you get you get paid for it. And then at the end, once the company is working with the contract and is happy, then they don't have to continuously pay a percentage.
Yeah.
Just pay, the talent would have a higher pay.
Absolutely.
That's sort of the journey that I started, kind of really focusing on that. I mean, up until recently, I was also focusing on the payment as well, but I found that on the payment side, there are a number of interesting companies that are focusing on how they could really streamline the payment for talent internationally. On one hand, we have Deal and Oyster that have they're making headways on the compliant pay. We have stable coins that hopefully would really facilitate payment contractors and workers globally outside of the nuances of banking
Hmm.
systems. But when it came to sort of this kind of assessing if the candidates have relevant work experiences, I found that there's a big gap, and a lot could be done. A lot could be done by the community as well. So you could
Hmm.
kind of have that sort of a
Yeah.
Web3 framework for taking advantage of the community, but also trying to set up a framework, and I could tell you more about that, to actually aggregate, curate, and also give the control to the candidates. Like basically have a
Yeah.
service, you are helping the candidate, but also benefiting the business in a way that you would eliminate fake profiles and fake claims. And there's a lot of that out there, unfortunately. And then
Yeah.
increase the chance of candidates who actually have are credible and have relevant experience and don't get noticed because of the noise.
Yeah.
So that's
I love
basically
that.
the mission we are focusing on. Obviously, we are going through iterations. We are talking with, potential partners right now. We are still early, but that's definitely a mission,
Mhm.
kind of enabling this amazing shift in the future of work is something that,
I
uh,
absolutely love that. Because, the thing with DAOs, Web3, blockchain technology, when you hear people talk about them, you hear about the flashiness, the NFTs, the money that's being made or the money that was lost because the markets are down, and you hear about all of this. But you don't hear about the real world applications for people that maybe aren't interested necessarily in crypto, verification and vetting, and I think, you mentioned, the Scandinavian countries and um, Finland came to mind because I think it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago during the pandemic, that they started experimenting with blockchain technology as a way to verify people's identification. I remember that, and I'm like, why aren't more people doing this? Because it is something that's publicly verifiable, through the blockchain. It's something that you can hold people accountable for. And I'm like, that needs to be done more. And the same way, like I'm thinking of now what you're talking about with the vetting process. I'm like, yes, that can make everything so much easier. And especially with smart contracts, that's something that you don't hear enough about. Yes, there are people that are talking about it. There are companies that are doing it. I know that IBM was doing it with crap, I forgot. um, I forgot what it was called. I'll have to put it in the show notes. But yeah, it's just, people are doing it, but not enough people are doing it, or at least they're not enough people are talking about it. Rather, there's a lot of people doing it, but there's not enough people talking about it and talking about its value, promoting it actively, because that's something that needs to be talked about. The only thing you hear about is the stuff that you see on the news when, someone runs off with however many crypto that they stole from whomever, now they're being hunted or whatever. But there are real world benefits to, the blockchain technology. So I'm happy that you mentioned that you're working on that. So that's pretty cool, actually. I'm excited to see that. I'm excited. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. But to your point, the thing is, when we were in a bull market, right? Like everyone was trying to have, not everyone, but basically a lot of people are trying to basically look at, opportunities that would give them, that gain as fast as possible, right? And there was a lot of focus on kind of financial products, right? That were related to crypto and blockchain. I personally, I didn't invest much in the crypto, even though I'm a believer in basically the growth of blockchain and the fact that it's going to be ubiquitous in the near future. Yeah. But the great thing about it for me was the investment in the infrastructure and also the user awareness. So now we are in this bear market. A lot of people, when I'm mentioning that, okay, well, this work experience, the validated work experience is going to be a token, all of a sudden they would think that, okay, well, so that means that, we have to buy Bitcoin. And then what if the Bitcoin, I'm like, no. But this is the art of people who would build the right product. You could leverage the infrastructure, but you have to create an experience where the user basically adopts it and doesn't feel that they're doing something that is kind of too different or too risky. So I think this is on the shoulder of people who are creating the work experience, the user experience. And we've done that in the past, right? Like a number of years ago, I would say 10, 15 years ago, people were not comfortable to provide their bank account information, right? We built that experience in a way that it was trustworthy and it didn't have too much friction, and at the same way it was compliant. So we have to kind of do the work here as well, leverage the infrastructure, take benefit from the goodness, right? But at the same time create a user experience that is sort of workable for average users.
And at the end of the day, it really comes down to education, because you know, how many people truly understand? There's people that, yes, they know about it because everyone has heard about it by now. As much as they've heard about it, they might have heard about the negative side more. And, most human beings, we're funny people. We remember the negatives more than we do the positives, just because the negative is usually more impactful. And it has a more, powerful effect on us. It's just the way that humanity is. It's a scientific fact. It's been proven many times over. So, it's, Pavlov's theory. You don't, if a dog, you shock them, it's going to remember not to do something. It's education. We need to educate people to show them the potential value of something, the benefits of it, globally, that it's actually better for you, whether it's in terms of security or just speed, efficiency. You're not just going to be limited, because you think about now, I don't know how many people are still doing this. I always tell people, because I review a lot of resumes from friends that they do this. They send me at the bottom, and I always tell them take it off. References available upon request. I'm like, if they want your references, they're going to ask you. No one, you don't have to do that anymore. That just doesn't exist. Not only that, your network is your reference. Whether, LinkedIn or whatever social platform you're on, your network is your references. They'll find you. They'll find out what they need to find out. That's just another way. It's just another form of vetting. And that's all it is. Your references.
Absolutely. this is the thing. I mean, there were so many scams as well. So that's why that, educating is important. But sometimes, unfortunately, people just don't have the patience to spend the time and kind of go deep to kind of understand, okay, which part of it is risky, which part of it is a scam, and which part of it just makes sense. But I'm also a strong believer that we could have it two and a
Yeah.
half, web 2.5, right? Like, let's not
Yeah.
focus on this is a web 3 experience, right? Let's just create the right experience and sort of gradually also kind of educate the
Yeah.
user. And
Agreed.
I've been always kind of hesitant about this sort of dichotomy of a web 2 versus web 3, and we're kind of replicating this for web 3 because we have this in web 2 but we don't have it in web 3. I'm like, okay, forget about web 2 or web 3. You have a problem, let's just solve it in the best way possible, right? Okay, so
Yeah.
for example, like one of the things that we're looking at right now for this kind of vetting, one of the aspects is that when you're hiring someone, whether full-time or as a freelancer, sometimes you want to make sure that they have the right licenses. Like, for example, if you're
Mhm.
hiring like a nurse, you want to make sure that she has a
Yeah.
license in that state. So there are databases out there and you kind of connect to them and there are updates. So in the beginning, if you want to just like force people to just have something on the distributed ledger, right, on the
Mhm.
blockchain, it's just such a big hassle. It's like fraction. So it's friction. So how do you actually kind of gradually do this? Like maybe like you connect to the databases, have it in a web 2 way, but then give the incentive to just have this information on chain, and it's basically updated in a more systematic way so that gradually you're kind of taking care of it and you have that benefit. So I think web 2.5 is the way to go to make sure that kind of you are reaching out to the mainstream and not the
Yeah.
the small slice of the population who are web 3 enthusiasts. And by the way, a lot of them have left just because they were just after the hype. Anyway, I mean, I'm a strong believer that it's gonna
Yeah. I'm with,
succeed, but we have
yeah.
to
No,
do
I'm with
it
you.
in the right way.
I'm with you. Yeah, I think people get hung up on the buzzwords too much and the lingo, and I'm with you. I think it's going to succeed. It's a long-term thing. It's a long-term play. It's not a quick turnaround, and I think that's what people need to understand. Anything worth doing is going to take time. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be like, well, hey, you said Web3 is the future. Well, like you said, maybe Web3 is like still a full blown Web3 is still 5, 10 years down the line. And we're currently in a Web 2.5-ish, moving toward a 3. And people are still hung up on those little buzzwords, but Web3, Web3, Web3. And it's just like, what's the product? What's the platform? What's the solution? What's the problem that this solution is solving? Let's focus on this and then let's go from there. It's like, if you're a SaaS product, do you have, product market fit? What's your ideal customer profile? Do you have your MVP? Let's proceed. Let's go. But if you're hung up on the buzzwords, if you're gonna get hung up on the lingo, you're gonna completely just miss the forest for the trees, as they say, and just stop. Maryam, I want to be respectful of your time, but do you want to talk? I mean, the floor is yours. Anything you want to talk about, if you want to say anything else about what you got going on, or you just want to let people know where to reach you, how they can learn more about you, please.
Definitely. I'm a kind of a pretty kind of private person in a way that I don't spend much time, like tweeting or posting things on Instagram or, like basically all my social profiles are pretty private. The LinkedIn, I guess, is public. I'm kind of more focused on
Yeah.
building usually, and I'm goal oriented, but
Yeah.
I would love to hear folks' opinions and feedback on the problem that I'm tackling. If they want to partner, either because they are in this space, because maybe like they are recruiters. There are actually some recruiters that are joining me as product advisors, or they are freelancers and they felt like they couldn't get the right jobs because for some reason they didn't have the right brands on their resume, maybe the Ivy Leagues, or the top 50 or top 100 tech companies, like maybe they didn't work with them, but they feel like they have a lot of relevant experiences. I would love to hear from them and have them as early users, or if there are like companies who want to partner or just have a conversation. So the name of the company, again, we are pretty much still in stealth mode. I think this is the first time that I've disclosed so much about what I'm working on, which is like, we are just basically kind of taking the time to do the right planning and the right build. But the name of the company is Attesto, as in like attestation, attest, and then Attesto. And my name is Maryam, so they could reach out to me at Maryam@attesto.co. There's also my LinkedIn profile. I actually read messages on LinkedIn. I know that a lot of people don't. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I would love, we have a couple of people on our founding team, but we are still kind of recruiting. So anyone who is passionate about future of work and this problem, I would love to hear from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is great. And if anybody from Fiverr or Upwork watches or listens to this, I feel like they need to sort of integrate with this tech now. They need to reach out to you so that, because they have, I think arguably they have probably the most freelancers, on their platform, both their respective platforms that people use consistently. I think it would be great to sort of have that validation, that vetting process like this. I think we got to find a way to make that happen. We have to figure out a way to make that happen, because that has to happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, what's happening right now, and actually the lead designer on the team is actually from Latvia and has been a freelancer for many years. Actually, through him, I learned that a lot of jobs on TopTal or Upwork and so forth are actually not available to a lot of freelancers outside the US, partly because of the time zone, but partly is also, I mean, I kind of understand where they're coming from, because the risk is high because they might not have enough information. But our mission is to have actually ways to validate the work experiences and validate the skills. So hopefully we could help, likes of Fiverr, basically work marketplaces, to kind of identify the talent that's out there.
Oh, that would be awesome. I know that they would benefit greatly from that. We have to figure out a way to make that happen. We're going to have to just start cold calling and cold emailing a bunch of Fiverr and Upwork executives to make this happen.
Well, hopefully at some point we're gonna basically get their attention in one way or another.
Maryam, I want to thank you so much for your time. I'm really grateful for you taking the opportunity, or for giving me the opportunity to speak to you rather. And yeah, thank you so much
for having me.